Today I want to show you how to make big images really small, really easily on Squarespace specifically, but it would work for any website builder because that's kind of how the web works. This is a common issue that I see a lot for people that just really have no idea this is a thing, that it's a necessary thing, that it could really affect the overall size of your website and how fast it loads for your viewers. And we all know that we're all impatient, and if the website is slow to load, people are most likely not going to stick around. That's a really bad thing. You don't want that. But before I dive into that tutorial and walk you through all of the things you need to know for this whole process, my name is Caitlin, if we haven't met before, and I run Launch the Damn Thing. I'm a Squarespace designer and educator. I've got a background in graphic design, and I know a thing or two or five from my 20 years of experience in this industry. And I'm here to share it with you because I'm kind-hearted and I like to talk about techie shit. With the release of Squarespace's new updated asset library feature where they are now compatible with or allow you to upload WEBP file formats, there's a lot that has changed as a result of that. And I have experienced this myself with one of the first projects I've done since that update this year, 2025, as of recording. So I wanted to walk you through some of the knowledge bits that are now relevant because Squarespace added this file format option. Before, in case you weren't aware, Squarespace only really allowed you to upload videos, JPEGs, and PNGs to the asset library. And if you're wondering what an asset library is, on Squarespace, you have under the website, this might look different for you depending on when you're watching because Squarespace does have a tendency to edit their menu system relatively frequently. But under website, under assets, you have a list of all your files. If you have folders in here, they'll be listed in the sidebar too. And then of course your trash. All of the images on your website exist in this space. And that is related to all of your blog posts. If you have an event page collection, if you have a shop collection, all of the images on your site exist here and your videos and whatever else. But they only allowed us to upload JPEGs or PNGs, videos or GIFs to this place until recently. Now they're also allowing us to upload WEBP files, which are optimized specifically for web. So they're more efficient size-wise. They take up less space in the storage. They take up less space on the visitor's computer when they download the content on the page to view it. So faster loading speed, all of the things. So this is a good move. However, if you have an existing website, moving things over to WebP might be a little bit confusing. So let's take a look at it. If we go back to my notes here, this is actually a Notion document that I have a freebie. So I'll put the link below. You can grab it if you want to. Just for reference, I have a quick favorites section across the top that lists the two web applications that you can use in your browser. They're not downloadables to bulk resize your images. One of them also converts images. I'll go into that in a minute because that's the one I'm highlighting today, but they both will resize your images. Why are we resizing our images? What do I mean by that, Caitlin? So let's get into that too. File size terminology. I have another video that goes over this in much more detail, but just high level overview. You never, ever, 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 ever want to upload an image or any kind of asset that's not a video. Videos are an entirely separate thing. GIFs are somewhere in between, but images specifically, you never, never want to upload an image as a size in megabytes. So if we look at the chart here, kilobytes is the smallest file size group. So it is 0 kilobytes up to 1,000 kilobytes. When you get to 1,000, you're now at 1 megabyte. So these are in increments of 1,000. That means the smallest increment that the file can be is kilobytes. The next largest after kilobyte is megabyte. The reason you don't want to have images that are in megabytes on your website is because it will require a very fast internet speed in order to load a website page with a bunch of these on it. So if your individual image is, say, 5 megabytes, but you have 20 of them, this is getting highly technical. You're essentially asking the visitor's browser to access 5 times 20 megabytes worth of information, and that's just the images. That doesn't include all of the rest of the content on the page. That's going to slow down, depending on their internet connection, how fast that page loads from top to bottom, and you'll start to notice that as you go down. The way that we try to work with that is to downsize the file size. I don't mean pixels, I mean the actual space that the file takes up on your computer. So if you can get that as small as possible, it will speed up the time it takes for each page to load on your website, no matter how many images it has on that particular page. Now, with that in mind, if you just look at KB, kilobytes, and the goal is to get all of your images in KB, and you're never, ever, 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 ever going to upload images to your asset library that are MB or megabytes. Now you need to know what's the limit of KB. Squarespace recommends that each image should be no more than 500 kilobytes. SEO Space says no more than 250 kilobytes. So if we look at the spectrum here between 0 and 1,000, they're all kilobytes. Up to 1,000, then you're cutting that in half based on Squarespace's recommendation, so 0 to 500. And if you go by SEO Space's recommendation, you're cutting that in half, which is now a quarter. Basically, you want all of your files to be under 500, preferably under 250 kilobytes, KB. So which one do you listen to? Squarespace knows their system best, but Henry from SEO Space knows SEO best. So I lean towards getting them as small as possible, especially if you have an image-heavy website. It's going to be more important for you to have very small images. So the next question is, how do you do that? Because if you go to sites like Unsplash, for example, and you download a bunch of free assets that you can put on your website as stock images, now if we open that folder where I've downloaded a bunch of images on my computer, I can see how big these actually are. And again, all I did is click the download button. I didn't open the image. I didn't select download and choose a size, which you can do in Unsplash, which is great, but I didn't do that. I just clicked the download button here, and what I got is rather large images. So if you're on a Mac, you can go to this icon here and click on view or show view options. From this little pop-up, you can set it to show you the item info, and that adds the pixel value of each image at the bottom. So you can kind of get a sense of how big these actually are. And when I say big, I mean their actual dimensions. So if we close this and we look at this image right here, if I go to right click and then get info or press Command I on my keyboard, I'll be able to see that this image is 4.9 megabytes. It's almost 5 megabytes by itself, which means it is 5,000 kilobytes. Way too big if we're trying to stick under 250 kilobytes. I'm bad at math, but that seems like a 10th or a 20th. Or more. This is so much bigger than it needs to be for a website. It's a high quality image, but we don't need it to be that big. So how do we fix this? Because that's going to be the case for a lot of these. If I open this one, Command I, same thing, 4.5 megabytes. If I open this one, same thing, 3.7. They're all going to be too big. And if you've pulled your stock photos from Unsplash through Squarespace's system here, so if you're uploading your own, or if you're on a website page, for example, adding a stock photo to the background here, and you pull it directly from the library and you choose stock images or stock backgrounds, these are both going to be large, high quality images that are probably going to be pretty big. And there's no way for you to convert them into a smaller web optimized version unless you download it first. So this is where it gets kind of tricky. Now that you know how how big your file is, how to look at it, how to look for that information, what you might need to also know is the difference between the different file formats. This is a question I see a lot. The new WEBP version is relatively new, so let's talk about that. It's probably the smallest file size of the options that you can upload into Squarespace. It maintains the quality though, just like JPEG and PNG would. The WEBP file format is now Squarespace compatible, so you can upload it into Squarespace asset libraries and image blocks, and anywhere that you can add an image. It also supports transparent backgrounds, which means you can just use WEBP for standard images or things like logos that have no background color behind the design itself, whereas you used to need a PNG file for that, and PNGs tend to be on the larger side. So now you can just use WEBP for everything, essentially. The reason why I say supports transparent backgrounds is because they don't always have transparent backgrounds. That completely depends upon your design. If you assign a background color in your design and then export it as a WEBP, you're going to have a background. But if you don't assign or give it a background color in Canva or whatever, it will have the option to not have a background color. In other words, when you have a design open in Canva and you go to share and then download, there is a checkbox there for the file format, and you have to check the transparent background option in order for Canva to download it onto your computer without a background color. If you have Adobe files, you know what I'm talking about, and you don't need any more information than that. So that's what supports transparent backgrounds means. It means it literally supports the option, but it is not standard. It's not default. It's not going to be that way for every image. You have to decide which way you want it when you actually export the file. It also supports animation. So WEBP can also act like GIF, and it's a smaller file. I'm a little unsure as of posting whether or not Squarespace supports animated WEBP right now. When they first released it, it wasn't working. I haven't tried again. And then it's also okay for logos. So that's WEBP. This little gray check mark is kind of an in-between. It's okay. It's not best. It's not worst. So JPEG is originally smaller than PNG, typically, always. It's also always smaller than GIF files, and it maintains quality well enough, depends on how you export it, but that's the same for every file format out there. It is Squarespace compatible. It does not support any transparent anything at all, ever. It does not support any kind of animation, and it's okay for logos, but depends on whether or not you're going to want the background behind the logo to be transparent, because it does not support transparent backgrounds. PNGs are very similar to JPEG, except that they maintain better quality usually. Again, it depends on how you export it. It can be a small file size, but it depends on what's actually in the image and how many pixels are in there. It's kind of the same thing for all of these. And it's Squarespace compatible. It does support transparent backgrounds, but it also can use them or not, kind of like WEBP. You have to decide when you actually export the file whether or not you want the exported file to have a transparent background. So it's not a default option. They aren't all like that. And it does not support animation, and it's great for logos. That's probably the recommended format that you should use for logos. For GIFs, this is what you recognize from Jiffy, whatever else. They're almost never small files. They're almost always several megabytes. At minimum, maybe 2 megabytes. And at maximum, I've seen upwards of 10 and even up to 20 megabytes. So they can be rather large. That's because what actually makes it a GIF is it is actually saving every frame of the movement. So if you have a movement that is picking up your coffee and bringing it to your face and taking a sip and then putting it back down, when it breaks that video into a frame by frame, it saves every frame. And they are actually images. It's kind of like stop motion. Think of it like that. Every frame in the video from you picking up your coffee, taking a sip, putting it back down, that's saved inside the file. And so it's not a video file. It is a file that has sort of stop motion screenshots, essentially, of every minute, tiny little thing, like first up, and then toward you, and then toward you, and then toward you, and then toward, like, you see what I mean? Like, it's every frame by frame. So one 10-second GIF might have 500 images contained inside of it. That's what makes it large, and that's what makes it animated. Anyway, we're getting highly technical here. Quality, let's talk about that. Almost non-existent. Most GIFs are not high quality. If they are high quality, they're going to be huge. They are Squarespace compatible. I use a lot of them on my website for specific types of stuff. They do support transparent backgrounds, but they're not high quality transparent backgrounds. So you might see a little bit of like pixelated remnants around the edges of the things that are up against the transparent background area. So not ideal, but it does work. Of course, it supports animation. And it's really not great for logos because, again, the quality is usually lacking. So how do you decide? Basically, WEBP is good for everything, and all the other stuff is now kind of irrelevant. So when possible, make it a WebP is basically what I'm saying. If you want to know common image sizes, basically now that WebP is possible, I'm making everything 2000 pixels, whether it's wide or high, but not both. And the file size 250 KB or under. Resolution for digital stuff is always going to be 144-ish and lower, but that's not really going to matter to most of you guys, especially not DIY people. You're really not going to notice this much in this process. So now that you get the information, again, if you want this, I'll put a link below to the freebie where you can kind of bookmark this page and come back to it if you want to. There's a lot more on it. Usually you wouldn't be looking at it on such a large screen, so open it at a smaller window than I'm looking at right now. It's a little bit in my face. I think we're ready to actually go through the process. If I go back to this and look at our folder again, we want to convert these from JPEG to WebP and in the same process, make them smaller dimensions. I don't want it to be 4600 pixels wide, 4000 pixels wide. These are all too big. They're unnecessarily big. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to my favorite bulk resize optimizer thing built by SquareStylist, and it's free. There's no account necessary. You just open the website. It's literally just PixResize.com. So what I do is I open this, and let's talk about the features really quick. This obviously is where you drag and drop the images in the little dotted line box. The file name prefix, if you leave it empty, it will tack onto the front of your file name the word processed with an underscore and then add the rest of the file name as it was originally after that. If you fill in this field, that basically tells it, I'm going to name all of these images based on that, and then give it a numbering system. So if you upload 10 images, they'll all be whatever you typed in, -10 or whatever, -1, -2, -3, -4. So this is a really quick way to reformat the file and rename them in bulk if that's what your intention is. But if you leave it blank, it's really easy to fix and not rename your files so you can keep those original file names if that's important. If you change the width, and this is something that I always do, but I'll show you in a minute, you can put a pixel value here, but I don't recommend that you put a value in both of these because it will confuse it. So only do the longest edge. If the file is wider than it is tall, put the pixel value in width. If it's taller than it is wide, then put it in the height and leave the other one blank. I typically always leave the quality on 80%. That's standard, it's default, that's the way it's gonna be when you open the page every time you refresh it, so that makes it easy. You can kind of skip over that. And then from format, you just pick WebP from the dropdown. JPEG is going to be default, but if you pick WebP before you actually process or upload any images, then you're all set and it'll do that. I also keep this toggle on, maintain aspect ratio, because I don't want it to squeeze something. For example, if I gave it a width of 2000 pixels and I left that toggle off, it might do something kind of funky. You don't want that, just trust me. All right, so now that we kind of understand what's happening, easiest thing to do is to batch these based on their orientation. And what I mean by that is the ones that are wider than they are tall, I'm going to put in here together. So these are all my landscape images. They are in landscape orientation. So I'm going to keep it on WebP and I'm going to change the pixel width to 2000, which is going to make all of these 2000 pixels wide as opposed to 4000 or whatever they were before. So it's really going to actually cut the file size in half by changing the width, and they're still going to be high quality enough to put on a website. So if I click process images, you're going to see that it's going to do that really fast. You get a little green OK down here at the bottom, and then click download. So now that that's downloaded, let's go back here and select all of the portrait images. So I'm going to go back here and refresh the page so I can start over because I don't want to re-export the ones I've already done. Click this, drag it in. And now instead of width, I'm going to select height and type in 2000. I'm going to leave quality at 80, change the format to WebP, keep the toggle on, and then process the images. In a couple of seconds, that'll be done. Look for the little green pop-up down here, then click download all. So now I have two new folders on my computer that have one batched, converted, and resized landscape photos, and I have another one that is batched, converted, and resized portrait photos. So if I go back to my downloads folder here, I can see the original folder, and then I have this archived or compressed folder and that archived or compressed folder. On a Mac, if I double click that, it will unzip it automatically. You'll still have the zipped file here. I have a background thing that gets rid of that artifact for me, but you can just delete it when you're done with it. What might be easiest to do is to group these if you want to hang on to the originals, which if they're your pictures, you probably want to do. I'll just call it originals. And then for these, I'll drag and drop them into the folder. So now if we go back here, I have the folder with the original files, and now I have all of these converted files. Let's switch to this view so we can see what's happening here. So to rename them, like I said, when you use this system and you do not use the file name prefix, it will sort of rename the file by just adding the word processed into the front of it, just so that it doesn't interfere with the file names in the original folder. So if we right click on that and click rename, what I like to do is replace text, type in exactly what's there. So if I have that blank, like you probably will, if you look at the example here, processed underscore whatever the file name is, but if I type processed underscore and replace with nothing, and there's nothing in there, there's no space, there's no punctuation, there's nothing. If I replace it with nothing, that means it just removes it. So if I click rename, it's going to rename all of those image files, and now the process is gone. I did not have to do that individually. Now they're ready to upload to Squarespace. So if I go back to our demo site here and go back to assets, I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to call it my stock images. And I'm going to open that folder, go back to my file here, click all of them and drag them in. And you'll see a little loading kind of circle thing down here in the corner. If you see that exclamation mark, don't worry. Usually it's wrong 98% of the time. So if you only see a handful of these images come in and you see that little exclamation mark, just refresh the page. And most of the time, if not always, you will see the rest of them show up. If you're not sure if everything showed up, a fun little hack is to select one, go down here to the bottom, click where it says one selected, click select all, and look at that number. It says there's 13 images. If we go back to our original folder, the images that I have selected, when I dragged them into Squarespace, it says 13. The 14th is the extra folder, and I did not want to put that in Squarespace. So all of them have successfully uploaded. A quick little hack, if you're ever unsure how to see how big the file actually is inside your Squarespace account, because you can't see this at time of recording from this view or from this view, which is absolutely maddening and ridiculous. You can always click the ellipsis and click on File Details, or double click on any of the images when you're in the asset library. From this view, it will show you the dimensions of the image and the file size. So with that conversion, by still keeping it at 2000 pixels high in this case, we still have a very high quality image, but the file size is well under the recommended limit. So best of both worlds here. And if we click on a landscape image, 2000 pixels wide, and it's still under the 250 kilobyte that we were aiming for. Now, if we go back to my asset library here and pull one of these assets, like this one, for example, because this came directly out of the Unsplash library, we can see that it is 2 by 2500 and it's 862 kilobytes in size, which is really way too big. If you have an occasional image that's this big, it's fine, but I would not make that the norm. It will slow down your website page. If it's happening across your whole site, it's going to slow down your entire site. And we all know, or maybe we don't, Squarespace is not widely known for being fast loading anyway. So you do not want to contribute to that and make it worse than it already is. So that's the quick overview. Let's do a quick recap here, refresh the page and start over again. The workflow is download whatever you want from wherever you want. Once you have those images, select them based on their orientation so it helps to be able to preview them so that you can see that. So I just press Command or Control on my keyboard to select them in bulk, drag them in, drop, In this case, they're landscape, so it's going to be 2000 pixels, quality at 80, format is WEBP, toggle is on, process images, and then download when it's done. After it's done downloading, you go to your downloads folder, uncompress it, rename the files, then upload them to Squarespace. And that's it. That will massively reduce the file size that each page is on your website, which means a faster loading experience for all of your visitors. So I hope that tutorial was helpful for you. If you have any questions about any of the stuff that we covered today, I've got the freebie link below. You can grab that if you want to. And there's a few blog posts on the topic on my website as well. Luna's saying bye. She doesn't know it. But that's all I have for you in this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.